from eastern Turkestan to Sudan to Yemen is a reflection of the last century that the Ummah has gone through. These Western powers managed to not just occupy Muslim lands and colonize them, but actually occupy the Muslim mind.
They weren't just happy that the Ottoman state would even fall because it may rise again.
Muslims are censoring their own religious scripture in order to please their masters.
Some people undermine the authority and the credibility of the Ottoman Khilafah.
You cannot compare any Muslim state to the standards that were done at the Ottoman period. And then he says it will go back to the original, which is Khilafah Rashida ala Minhaj al-Nubuwwah. That's why activism is important at this stage. Gaza has exposed the faults within the world order. You can actually make a new world order if you want. We'll have a share in raising and changing the world order.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Narrative House podcast. Today I'm very honored to have Dr. Khaled Al Owaisi back on the show. Dr. Khaled Al Owaisi is a Palestinian activist, a speaker and a historian. So today with Dr. Khaled Al Owaisi, I'm hoping to go into a lot more depth about our previous discussions that we had with regards to how the Ummah's unity was shattered and Palestine was lost. I mean, we sit here a little over 4 months ago since we had that initial podcast. And since that time, the situation has become even more dire. We now see a situation in Gaza where the Strip is almost completely destroyed. The US seems to have given the green light to the Jewish entity to occupy the West Bank. Sudan is still going through 2.5 years of civil war. Al-Fashir, a city in Darfur, is completely sieged, and 750,000 people are suffering from famine. So with that backdrop, what I really wanted to do today is trace back our steps and understand where we lost that unity and what were the main factors that led to that situation. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, Dr. Khaled Al Owaisi.
Thank you very much, Omar. It's an honor to be back here. Barakallah fikum.
Jazakallah khair. So firstly, I want to address a really important point of contention that some people make, and they undermine the authority and the credibility of the Ottoman Khilafah. Its detractors claim it was not truly an Islamic state in respect of its governance, and they also neglected, they claim that it neglected the administration of the lands outside the Turkish heartlands. Can you illustrate how the Islamic system is what made it a global power politically, militarily and economically for centuries?
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As you have started off, the situation today, as it continues across the Muslim world, from eastern Turkestan to Sudan to Yemen, is a reflection of the last century that the Ummah has gone through. And what is happening today is as a result of what has happened at the beginning of the 20th century, when these Western powers managed to not just occupy Muslim lands and colonize them, but actually occupy the Muslim mind. And this is actually, until now, the worst thing. We are still living in these boxes that they set for us, the flags they gave us, and we cannot break away from this. And the unity that we had as an ummah, so even if you say the Ottomans weren't truly Islamic, let's go with this argument. The last real Ottoman Sultan, Sultan Abdul Hamid, had this vision of Ittihad al-Islam, the unity of Islam.
Yeah.
And he appointed the Mufti of England at the time, and at the same time took care of the Muslims in Thailand and in Indonesia. And however symbolic this was, in reality the state was, the Ottomans were at the brink of collapse, but this was still symbolically something that brought the Ummah under one banner. And since this was dismantled, the Ummah has been a headless Ummah. And today, to talk about concepts like Sharia and Khilafah, and this is what we'll be delving into, is seen because of the occupation of the Muslim mind. These Islamic terminologies we cannot even utter amongst Muslims. jihad, sharia, khilafah. And this is a disaster because they're not just occupying your mind, they're occupying what you say and what you cannot say. And these are concepts in the Quran that no one can even question. Yet, you get to a stage where the Muslims are censoring their own religious scripture in order to please their masters. Going back to, we'll delve into some of these maybe in a little more detail, but delving back into the point that you were asking, how Islamic was it? Actually, it was an experience. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and sometimes we over romanticize our past, and we want it to be this flawless utopia, and we do not want to see any faults that existed. Actually, it is a human experience. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was supported by revelation, by wahi. When Rasulullah would make a decision, if it was wrong, he'll be immediately corrected by the wahi. If it was right, he'll be supported by revelation. With the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Ummah was starting to take its first steps. Now it was left on its own to walk on its own without the support of revelation. And this is why our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, the worst thing about the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is this is the end of divine human connection, and we are on our own as a humanity. This is why the Sahaba fought in Siffin, or in the battle of Jamal. Our mother Aisha fought against Ali, and both of them were right. It's because it's a human experience. You're meant to make mistakes, and you learn from your mistakes. So the Ummah went through Khilafah Rashida for 4 years, which was on the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then it went into what is more of a kingdomship, from father to son, or from dynasty to another. And this is where the Ottomans come in. However, it was based on Islam. Today, you cannot compare any Muslim state that claims whatever it claims to be adopting Islam or not to the standards that were done at the Ottoman period. The Ottomans were still implementing Islam within Hanafi fiqh, within Hanafi jurisprudence, and this was the picture that was being implemented. In terms, there are mistakes. Obviously, there will be mistakes, and sometimes big mistakes, but nothing next to what we came to afterwards. At least there was a system in place. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam talked about this in one of the hadith, that it will be a Khilafah Rashida on Minhaj al-Nubuwah, on the way of the Prophet. Then it will be from father to son, a sultana. Then it will be you'll be ruled whether you like it or not, which is what we're going through. And then he says it will go back to the original, which is Khilafah Rashida ala Minhaj al-Nubuwah. It will definitely go to that. This is not my words or your words. This is the promise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that at the end of this final stage that we're going through, inshallah, now, and that's why activism is important at this stage, because it will help us. We'll have a share in raising and changing the world order, and I think Gaza has instigated this. You see how there are so many flaws within the current system. Human rights, international law does not apply, is not implemented. It is just for a certain clique. And I think the best thing that Gaza has done, it has exposed the world. It has exposed the Muslims. It has exposed humanity. It has exposed the Ummah. And hopefully we will be able to learn from these mistakes and rise up again, inshallah.
And in terms of that comparison that you gave between the Ottoman state and its implementation of Islam versus the current situation
Yes.
now, is it fair to say this was an implementation of Islam that happened with mistakes versus a situation where Islam is
Not.
completely redundant
Yes.
in our current political
Yes.
reality?
Yes, I think you have summed it up perfectly.
Mm.
Today, there is no room for Islam in Islamic states or Muslim states. You
Muslim
can't
states.
even call
You
them
can't, yeah.
Islamic states. And even those who claim to be implementing even some form of Sharia or not, actually, it's all just tokenism in a sense, and there is no reality. So whatever the Ottomans implemented was way beyond anything that is being implemented today.
Yeah.
The Sahaba made mistakes, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this.
Mm.
This is part of the human experience. And I think we need to focus on this. A utopia does not exist, even in Medina. And I think some people, we over romanticize our past, that it becomes unattainable.
Yeah.
And I think we have to bring it back to earth, ground it back. And I think the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, you think at the time in Medina, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, everyone was a mu'min at the level of ihsan. This was not the case. So, some Sahaba would be brought in front of Rasulullah drunk. A female Sahaba would come and say, I committed zina. And you think, no way, they saw Rasulullah, this would not be possible. This was possible because they are human beings. They will make mistakes. And Islam is there to correct them and to guide them and to take them in the right direction. So they would have a better life on this earth. So the Islam and the Islamic history is a human experience with mistakes, with learning from these mistakes, but it is way better than any other system that has been implemented. You see how problematic today's systems are. You see how problematic secularism from one side to capitalism to communism to every isms out there, and they do not want you to try Islam, and they'll make sure that they'll cut you in your tracks to make sure that you do not implement even an inch of this, because it's a complete system that actually addresses the economy, social life, and people get really stuck up in the punishment side.
Exactly what was going through my mind.
Yeah. Which is less than 1% of what Islam is. It is there to deter. And that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam hardly implemented any of these punishments. And throughout Islamic history, the idea is to be a deterrent from people doing it, and not the other way around.
And I think that point is so crucial because, as you say, so much emphasis is put on the punishments, but the vastness of its economic system. And I saw a clip actually on Instagram a few months ago. It was of a young revert sister, and she was saying, well, I can tell you why they're attacking Islam. Because Islam is the one that's going to challenge capitalism. It is the one that has a completely alternative system in terms of economy, how to look after the poor, zakah, the way that we, look after, the resources of a nation. All of these things which are very much hidden in terms of the public discourse, really.
And there was a non-Muslim who compared between Sharia and
I saw that.
And the Western capitalist system in the States, and he was saying how fair that would work. The problem is we do not want to implement this, and the Muslims are too afraid to speak up for their own divine revelated system, while we are indulging in this capitalist system, and we have become too selfish to break out of this shell.
Can I just take you to the other part of that question, just to explore it a little bit? So one accusation is made that the Ottoman state was more focused on the Turkish heartlands and neglected.
I missed.
So I just wanted, obviously, as a historian, as someone who's deeply knowledgeable about this issue.
At the beginning of the Ottoman period, you see from Muhammad the Conqueror, Muhammad al-Fatih, to Yawuz Salim, to Salim the First, to Suleiman, actually their interest was not in, there was nothing called the Turkish heartland. And these nationalistic, later on, there was nothing called Turkey or Turkish,
This is,
or even they would disassociate themselves from such terminologies. Even Salah ad-Din, if you even go back further, this was not, your race was not an issue. Your Islam was what made you who you are. Yet this is how this is brought in, and you see how nonsense this is the moment you start delving into it. And you see, for example, they paid a lot of attention immediately to Mecca, Medina, and Bayt al-Maqdis. And you see this reflected in the Ottomans. It creates legitimacy for them, but at the same time, this is the holiest places of Islam. And the Sultan Suleiman in particular, after Salah ad-Din, the walls of around Bayt al-Maqdis, the city of Jerusalem, were destroyed. He rebuilt them, and the current walls are actually from the time of Sultan Suleiman.
Okay.
And you see where they built their magnificent mosques, in the Balkans. Not in, there was in Istanbul and Edirne and other places, but you see their biggest projects were actually in these faraway places. And a mosque is not just a mosque. A mosque comes with a lot of other immunities and other things to revive the communities within that area. You see this across Bosnia, all the way to Kosovo, all the way to the places where the Ottomans were. They left a print that you can actually see it, and you see it in other parts that they have controlled.
Yeah.
So it's the question itself is, in a sense, trying to give some nationalist view to the Ottomans, which didn't really exist. You see how all ethnicities actually mingled within the Ottoman state, and they didn't. This maybe at the end of the Ottoman state, maybe we can argue this, but this was not the case.
So I guess this was the rising nationalistic tendencies that came in later.
Yes.
It's interesting you mentioned Kosovo, because I prayed in the masjid of Muhammad al-Fatih in Pristina.
Yes.
And I believe that was the first masjid he built in the Balkans, possibly. Certainly one of the oldest mosques, actually older than the ones in Istanbul, because he conquered that first.
Yes.
So it was a beautiful masjid, actually, in Pristina.
Yeah. Also, if you go to Sarajevo and you go to various different places, you'll see actually impressive structures right in the heart of Europe.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So I want to now move on to where things started to go wrong. And many people talk about the Tanzimat Reforms, which happened in the mid-19th century. And they talk about how they eroded the concept of Sharia and diluted the Islamic identity of the Ottoman state. And specifically from that perspective, how much influence did the Western legal system have in these reforms? But maybe before you answer that, for our listeners and viewers, can you please explain what the Tanzimat Reforms were?
Okay. This is getting quite deep into the changes that took place at that particular time. These reforms started in the late 1830, 1839, and these reforms tried to take the Ottomans from the classical system they had to move towards a more European-centered, secular system in place.
Okay.
So the Tanzimat reforms were meant to do this, to try to take the Ottoman state to a more modern. And the influence of that is in 1830, the Ottoman governor of Egypt, Muhammad Ali Pasha, decides that he's going to bring the Ottomans down.
Okay.
So he occupies Bayt al-Maqdis, Palestine, Syria, goes through the Anatolian heartlands, and he's heading towards Istanbul, and he's going to end everything. And he is the modern father of, the father of modern Egypt. And he's seen as the creator of modern Egypt today. Um, and this was after Napoleon tried to occupy Egypt and to try to occupy Beit al-Maqdis and Palestine in the late 1700s, 1798 and 1799. Then the Ottomans appointed Muhammad Ali Pasha over Egypt, and then he tries to bring the Ottomans down.
Okay.
This is where the Western powers try to push these ideas that you cannot keep the old system. You have to change it, and you have to upgrade to our new way. So this was the way this was being pushed, modernization. And what Muhammad Ali Pasha did was to please the West. He opened the first British consulate, a Western consulate in Jerusalem. And this is where the West tried to put conditions on the Ottomans that we're going to help you. It's not time for the Ottomans to fall yet. This was too early because this would collapse. We would lose everything. So let's first try to change the system, make it more aligned with what we want. Then when we come to divide, and this was a century later, this would be easier for us to do. And it is incredible how that went through. Sorry, you asked me to introduce Tanzimat, and then
But that's a really
yeah.
interesting background. So
Yes.
it seems that what you're saying is they weren't just happy that the Ottoman state would even fall because it may rise again. They almost had to deconstruct the identity before it fell.
Yes, and plus,
Because they could have let Muhammad Ali
Yes.
Pasha just take over.
yeah. And
But-
they would, if they had just supported him a little bit,
Yeah.
they would have taken down Istanbul.
Yeah.
But this was not on the long term viable. So no, let's hold back. And the British helped the Ottomans to rebel him back, although they got so much out of him. And the way you look at this, the way Muhammad Ali Pasha is seen is, if you read what non-Muslims wrote about him and what the Egyptian archive has about him, you'll find this man was willing to go all the way. He allowed the Jews to pray at Al-Buraq Wall for the first time officially. He built 9 synagogues in Jerusalem for Jews when there was no Jewish population and there was no need for this. And this is where the changes within this Tanzimat reforms, actually until the Tanzimat, according to Hanafi Fiqh, no new churches can be built, no new synagogues can be built. This is all going back all the way to Abu Yusuf and Abu Hanifa and the Hanafi Fiqh in this regard. In Muslim lands, all churches can be renovated and should be protected, and no one would going back to Umar ibn Khattab and what he did, but no new structures can be built. What Muhammad Ali Pasha came and abolished this completely. The reforms, the Tanzimat reforms, also went in that same direction, and then started changing the Sharia-centered legislation to a more secular approach. There was a Millet system. The Millet system was actually an incredible system. When you read through it, you're really impressed how the Ottomans, and this goes back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he came to Medina, there was Jews and others in Medina. He says, to do anything to do with your religion, you have your own courts. You sort yourself out. And the Muslims implemented this throughout history, and the Ottomans developed this into an actual system and institutionalized it into the Millet system, where every domination within a certain religious sect or group have their own courts.
So it's like the Ahl al-Dhimma, their protection, their courts to manage their own affairs.
So their courts deals with their lives, their inheritance,
Marriage,
marriage,
things like that.
everything to do with this. And then you have the Supreme Court, which, if something is not resolved, then it's taken to this. And an amazing example from the archive in Beit al-Maqdis in Jerusalem, a Jewish woman goes to the rabbi, to the Jewish court, asks him for her right. He does not give her the right that she is entitled to. She threatens him, I will take you to the Muslim Qadi. And he immediately gives her what. So the system actually worked.
Yeah.
And it was something, the Muslims will never interfere in Jewish or Christian affairs. However, the Tanzimat and what it created actually created nearly a world war. In 1856, the Ottomans were trying to please, after these reforms, please the French on one side, the Catholics, and please the Russians on the other side, the Orthodox, over the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And then a massive war, the Crimean Wars, started because of the religious holy places in Jerusalem and who has right. Is it the French or the Russians? And it blew into a massive world war at the time. So the reforms actually took us in a completely different direction. It weakened the state. And it wasn't just on the religious, the economic, at one side it brought in modernization. We're copying the new Western model, which was at the time rising with after the French Revolution and after these states were established. It was taking us to a completely different level with development, with the industrial revolutions that were taking place. And this left the Ottomans in some sort of stagnation. And this then has to be, you have to copy this system and secularize the Ottomans to some extent, give what they say, you give all your citizens the same right.
Yeah.
So they saw that non-Muslims were seen as second-class citizens, when actually this was not the case. Each one had their own courts and what I explained earlier, but it wasn't like they presented, the Orientalists presented, that non-Muslims were second-class citizens. They pay the jizya. This is really, really bad. And when you look into this, actually, jizya is less than the zakah a Muslim has to pay.
Yeah.
But the way they present this, it makes you feel a Christian or a Jew cannot pay zakah because it's a religious obligation.
Yeah.
A jizya is an alternative form, and it is always less than a Muslim pays in his zakah.
Yeah.
But the way this is being pushed by Orientalists and even pro-liberal thinkers is to present Islam as backward,
Yeah.
as stagnant, as something that doesn't develop, something that for 1,000 years worked. And there were internal problems, and maybe we can touch maybe on some
I
of them.
also heard that Tanzimat reforms were extremely costly for the Ottomans to implement because you had to now have essentially two legal systems in operation. So new courts, new judges, new everything. And that was a huge undertaking from a state that was obviously administering a huge area. So that was also an interesting...
So initially what was working actually for a long time, now you had a system that worked, and they're saying if it's working, don't fix it.
Don't fix it.
Yes. We went and we broke the system and then we brought a dysfunctioning system that crippled the Ottomans. And you come to the time of Sultan Abdul Hamid, the state is in so much debt. It cannot get out of these. So copying this, and sometimes the idea of exporting another system from another place And this is what happened with nationalism and the other things. You copy paste these systems and you bring it. It does not fit within this environment. The separation between state and church in Europe actually was part of the European experience. And Europe needed that at the time because the church was manipulating, and not just manipulating, controlling knowledge, restricting it. So you needed to separate this. This was not the experience in the Muslim world. Never did Islam do this. Never did you have religious authority in the same way that happened in Europe. Stop this. Islam encouraged science, encouraged scholarship. It did exactly the opposite. So that's why you had a thriving Islamic world, and at the same time, it was the Dark Ages in Europe. When they split the church from the state, then they managed to excel. So we thought we can implement the same, and that will help us excel. That didn't. Because Islam is what made you excel.
Yeah.
If you move away from it, you're gonna. And Umar ibn Khattab said this, and I really love this quote. When he liberated Al-Aqsa in the 7th century, many of the Sahaba were dressing up like the Romans, or, they say, oh, these clothes, we have to. And he says to them, you were كنتم أذل الناس وأحقر الناس وأقل الناس. You were the least, the most humiliated, and people with no value. And he said, you Arabs. And Allah gave you izzah in Islam. Wherever you seek izzah apart away from Islam, Allah would humiliate you.
Yeah.
This applies to the Turks, this applies to the Kurds, this applies. Islam brought you up and made you who you are. And then you're doing it, you want to seek izzah away from Islam, you see this for the last century. This is the status.
That's a really vital point that you've made, because what we've done as a ummah in our history, we've looked at their progression, as you say, through their own experience, which is that they needed to separate the oppressive church, the controlling church, the backward church from their state institutions. And that's how they led to their own progression. But we've just looked at that and said, oh, that must be the same.
Yes.
That will be the same, that will have the same influence or the same impact on us. And they've just run to do that, when in reality, that was the first step to the complete dismantling of, I guess, the strength of the ummah.
Yes.
Yeah, so a really important point. Now, moving on, because obviously you've mentioned how Muhammad Ali Pasha and the influence of the West in those Tanzimat reforms and the reason for them, but specifically thinking about the Muslims themselves internally, you still have to be, I guess, in a position of decline to adopt such thinking and to allow these ideas to be accepted, because ultimately, if you're still strong in your Islamic belief and your thinking, your intellect, you would not necessarily rush to implement what is being suggested by the Western powers. So what decline was happening in the Muslim world at that time, specifically in the Ottoman state, that allowed them or made them prone to adopting these Western reforms?
Yes. What happened is Islam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions this in a hadith. At the beginning of every century, there is always a revival. So in this sense, there is always a dynamic change within Islam, and it's not stagnant. Within the Ottoman period, we got to a stage where we have become in a state of stagnation, where things were not, and what they called closing the gate of Ijtihad.
Okay.
So there is no room for ijtihad anymore. Our previous scholars and predecessors have done a great job. We will just explain what they explain. So you have a sharh, annotation or explanation on the original text. And then you'll have the next stage, a sharh on the sharh. So an explanation on what has been explained. And then it got to a stage where things were not really moving forward. And this was the stagnation of the Muslim mind was a disaster.
Just for our viewers as well, because ijtihad is
Yeah.
known amongst, I think, a lot of the
Yeah.
ummah, but for some people this concept may not
Yeah.
be fully understood.
Yes.
And just to maybe if you can explain it in terms of this is specifically looking at new issues that
Yes.
come about, because some people, oh, well, Islam has rules about alcohol and about
Yeah.
marriage and this, but explain why ijtihad is necessary,
Yes.
and what were the pitfalls of adopting a kind of approach where they no longer try to understand the current or new realities
Yes.
to present a Sharia rule.
Yes. So this takes us back to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So when Rasulullah sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen, he says to him, how would you deal with issues? He says, I'll look in the words of Allah in the Quran. He says, then if you don't find it, he says, I'll look in your words, the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his example. He says, if you don't find it there, and this is the dynamism that we're talking about, he says, Ijtahidu ra'i. I will make ijtihad, which is I will look at the situation and I will, based on the Quran and the Hadith, I will develop my own opinion.
Yeah.
And he says, that's perfect. That is what ijtihad is. And what we see immediately, and ijtihad is not just in religious matters, in political matters, and so for example, if we go to the end of the Khilafah Rashida with Ali al-Hasan alayhi salam, he was the last of the rightly guided Khalifa after Ali, the son of Ali al-Hasan. Then Muawiyah made ijtihad on a political system. Is this right or wrong? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, whoever makes ijtihad, if he's wrong, he'll get one reward. If he's right, he'll get double the reward.
Yeah.
So the idea is do not ever stop. You have to always be in this dynamic thinking process and always try things. Even if you're going to make a mistake, do not stop. So you might say, well, moving away from the Ummah choosing its representative to being within Bani Umayyah is the biggest mistake in the Muslim history. Well, and this is what I used to think for a very long time, until I met with a scholar of Usul al-Fiqh, which is the principles of jurisprudence. And he said, had Muawiyah not done this, we can argue about this at another time, had Muawiyah not done this, the Ummah would have collapsed. I said, how? That's... He says, there was so many, Islam has spread so far. If you did not adopt, and that was the system that worked at the time. It worked in China, and it worked in every part in the world. It's tribal, family ruling, and a dynasty is what runs. Otherwise, this would not have taken place. So this was a form of ijtihad. Many people see it as a wrong ijtihad in terms of politics. If this was the wrong ijtihad, why did all those who came after it keep it? So the Abbasids kept it, the Ayyubids kept it, the Seljuks kept it, the Ottomans kept it. The Mamluks went away from this system and implemented a different system, but apart from that, everyone implemented this. And what we see is, together with this political ijtihad, you had the religious ijtihad, and this was something that people would try to exert their opinion and their effort and their ideas in the current situation that was needed at the time. In a recent conference, I gave an example of a scholar, Imam al-Harawi, who made ijtihad, and this could be very upsetting to many people. When Al-Aqsa was occupied, before Salah ad-Din was even born, he saw how indifferent the Muslims were, and he wanted to shock. He went to Baghdad, to the center of the Khilafah. The Khilafah has become weak. There was stagnation. And sometimes you need to shock the system in order, when someone is dying, the ambulance will come and they will give him a shock
Yeah.
to try to get the heart to beat again. And that's what he did. So he went to meet the Khalifa. The Khalifa was too busy in Ramadan with the iftar programs. So they said to him, come after Ramadan. So he goes to the ulama. They say, give the khutbah of Jum'ah. But he sees people, and this applies to us today, people going on with their lives like nothing has happened, enjoying what you were saying earlier, their first, second, third holidays, working, eating, and drinking while people have been massacred in a genocide inside Al Aqsa. And looking at this pathetic state, he goes up to the minbar, and in the middle of Ramadan, he breaks his fast on the minbar. And people are shocked. People are really good, and we're really good at this, of calling name. Fasiq, kafir, what did you do? And he's a judge, a scholar, a alim. He knows that to break your fast deliberately in the month of Ramadan, you have to fast 2 months kafara. And plus he was traveling. He didn't need to fast. But putting all of this, he wanted to shock. And he had that effect. And eventually met the Khalifa. But he made a statement that the Muslims' priorities have been messed up. And the statement he made to liberate al-Masjid al-Aqsa is more of a religious duty than fasting and praying in the month of Ramadan. This is not to say fast, you shouldn't pray and you shouldn't fast. Exactly the opposite. Actually, he says, this is as important. You need to have a strategy forward. So this idea of ijtihad is to go out of your way to make sure that you find a solution to a problem that you have at the time. And you see this across Muslim history. But when we get to the end of the Ottoman period, people are saying our previous scholars have done everything. They've done every single ijtihad. There is no room for me and you to make ijtihad. There is no addition you can add as Omar or me as Khalid. Full stop. Everything has been done. They've discussed the qibla of someone praying on even a plane to this extent. So they've done all the thing in the past. Our job is to understand the works that are based on the original form, and this created a very weak Muslim mind that then was very easily infiltrated with new ideas that sounded, wow, they're doing this, they're doing that. So when you look at the results of this and you see the stagnation here, this seems to be, how did this work? By separating religion. Let's implement the same thing. Let's separate religion from our life, and then maybe we can be like them. And that their experience is different from yours, and that cannot work in that way.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Just taking you back on that point about the ijtihad or the Muawiyah's position in terms of hereditary rule.
Yes.
A lot of people would argue that it's because of actions like that the Ummah started that road to decline, because they didn't stick firmly to the Sharia when it came to influencing their decision making. Because that when we look at the time of Umar al-Khattab, who was very strict about not passing on to his son, and we see Ali radhiyallahu anhu accepting the decision about Uthman, and this was their position. But then you have here Muawiyah, kind of, let's say there was the issue between him and Ali, but more so with regards to Yazid being put forward as his successor, that this was the start of a corruption in the political system.
Yes. Actually, this is, you would think we should have continued in this way, but it was clear that was not possible. Already over the death and the Shahada of Uthman, this difference started. And I recommend everyone listening to read a book by Muhammad Mukhtar al-Shanqiti, It's in English also, about the political differences of the Sahaba. Amazing book. Because it sets the methodology of how you should deal with these. And this is not his opinion. This is the opinion of Muslim scholars over a millennia. Over 1,000 years, he brings all the opinions of the established Muslim scholars on how to deal on this. The Quran talks about if a two group of mu'mineen fight, then how you should resolve it. The difference is inevitable. It's impossible to have everyone on the same page. For this reason, what happened, yes, Umar ibn Khattab was against this idea. So was Abu Bakr, so were the other Sahaba. But when it came after Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anh, Al-Hasan, his son, was chosen. We might say then, why did we accept it for Ali and his son? And Imam al-Hussein radiallahu anh fought against Yazid because of this. Because this was not a consensus amongst the Muslims.
Yeah.
As long as there is consensus, then we can actually move forward. But at the time, there was no way to get consensus amongst the Muslims. We differed immediately at the time of the Sahaba. Should we get revenge for the blood of Uthman and deal with the killers, or should we establish authority? And both opinions actually were viable. The people, the wife of Sayyidina Uthman, she said, I want revenge from the killers who are occupying Medina. We should not. And Sayyidina Ali said, it's impossible. We cannot. They're in power. I need to first re-establish power before I will eventually do this.
Yeah.
And then it got to the Sahaba actually fighting face to face over a small difference. So immediately we lost that consensus. And it was impossible to bring it. Just within the Umayyad, the Qaisis and the other tribes, bringing them together was really next to impossible. So these dynamism within society are really problematic. Today, however, it is possible. It is possible for at the time. It is impossible to get the opinion of all the Muslims and have a consensus on a particular idea. Today, this is possible. With the technology we have today, you have 2 billion Muslims around the world. If you hold an election, maybe you can get all the Muslims to choose. The problem is and this takes us back to Gaza again. Gaza has exposed the faults within the world order. You can actually make a new world order if you want, but we're not even thinking in these forms, even theoretically. How would a new system work? How would a new system work not for Muslims? Islam was never as a system for Muslims. It is for humanity.
Yeah.
And this takes you back to why Adam alayhi salam was created in the Quran. Inni ja'alun fil ardi khalifa. And Dawood alayhi salam. This concept is for humanity. For a better world for everyone. But the way it's presented, it is only for Muslims and so on. And you had an interview with a rabbi who told you, I'd prefer the Khilafah system because it's a system that actually gives us our rights.
That's right. That's right.
And
Many others have said the same. Yeah.
Yes. But we as Muslims, we
Yeah.
prefer not to talk about this because this would make you sound like you're backward, wanting to implement an old system. And when you have democracy and capitalism and the Western system, why would you move backward? We see how corrupt this system is.
Yeah. I guess this is the time where you have to be more clear about your vision because, in fact, there's a very clear, I would say, shift in Western even public opinion, let alone the Muslim world, that the current prevailing system has failed. I mean, whether it's economic crises, whether it's genocides, whether it's a corrupt political system, I think many people are now asking, don't we need to look for a new system actually for humanity to, as you say, a new world order? I just want to pick up on the point that you mentioned regarding that shift that we had internally in the Ottoman state. Did that lead to a situation where the Muslims themselves now were concerned that this state was now just following a kind of hereditary monarchy type system, as opposed to being the representatives of Muslims or the Muslim lands that it was administering. At what point do we now see Muslims losing confidence in the Ottoman state? Because obviously we see the rise of nationalism,
Yes.
we see the rise of this kind of separatist movements. When did that start taking shape?
Yes. With the Tanzimat Reforms, first non-Muslims within the state started wanting these nationalist aspirations. So you had a lot of people breaking away from the Ottoman. And the Ottoman tried to create a sense of Ottomanism as an identity that collected people together. So they tried to push this idea. This pushed away many factions, and a lot of people started, this is non-Muslims breaking away from the Ottomans when these reforms were being implemented. Then, by the end of the 19th century, these ideas started crawling into the Muslim mind. So it took quite a while.
Okay.
And you'll be shocked where Turkish nationalism started or Arab nationalism started. It started in Paris, in the cafes of Paris. So it's not a natural development based on the experience of these societies in these places. It is an exported ideology that was exported from France, imported in the Muslim minds, and that was the start of this idea being pushed forward. When this started, then this started, and in the late 1800s, 1890s, Turkish nationalism started in France. There was things that happened before that, but as systematically working towards a Turkish nation or a nation state, that's when it started. And Arab nationalism started also with Al Arabiya Al Fatah in Paris at the beginning of the 20th century. And these also, Arab nationalism had its previous, particularly with missionaries and Christian missionaries in particular, in Bilad al-Sham and in Egypt. They had some influence, but as an organization, it started there. And until the time of Sultan Abdul Hamid had a very clever way of confronting this, which was his concept of Ittihad al-Islam. And amazing, really, when you look at it, it doesn't matter who you are, what your race is, Islam is what unites us. And I gave the example from Thailand to London. And this symbolic, and he built the railway, and that was with money, not from the state, from the Ummah. And the idea to connect to Medina. And this is a project of the Ummah, and he brought the Ummah over one project. And you see this very clearly within the life of Sultan Abdul Hamid. And these nationalists were the ones that brought him down. So eventually, in 1909, he was dethroned. And the reason was actually Bayt al-Maqdis in Palestine. And it was Ittihad in his last letter. He says the Ittihad and Taraqi, these nationalist groups, dethroned me because I would not give Palestine to the Jews. Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa, the Holy Land, he used. So within this nationalist or nation state, a Jewish state would work, a Turkish state would work. This state would work based on ethnicity. Let's push for these ideas forward. He stopped Jewish immigration into Palestine, although going back to 1840, when Lord Palmerston was convincing the Ottomans of the reforms, he said to them, we've helped you a lot. In return, allow the Jews to go to Palestine, and they'll be under our protection, And they really pushed this idea forward. And this was the start of Christian Zionism in the UK with his son-in-law, Lord Shaftesbury, who was a Christian Zionist. And the first consul that they appointed in Jerusalem was also a Christian Zionist. This evangelical group were really pushing this idea of moving the Jews to Palestine. So you can see how all of them are actually connected, separated maybe 70, 80 years apart. But you can see how this Sultan Abdul Hamid dethroned the rise of nationalism on one side, both Jewish and other forms of Arab and Turkish nationalism. And this then people, as a response to Turkish nationalists, so now they're in power. For example, in Bilad al-Sham, they would appoint a governor who would not be able to communicate with the people. They changed the language into Turkish across the board. Well, these places are Arabs. You have to address them in their language. In these places, they're Persians. In these places, you have to communicate with the people. And that created a rift between the Ottomans, now not the Ottomans, the Ittihad and Taraqi, these nationalist movements, and the people. And this caused dissent. And this led to the rise of Arab nationalism. So in 1914, Arab nationalism was now becoming the core in Damascus and in Syria. And this was pushed by Faisal, the son of Hussein, Sharif Hussein of Mecca. And they were pushing these ideas that and the British really took this to the next level. And I explained to you last time how I was physically sick reading some of these letters, and incredible. One of these letters is, how do you accept, as an Arab, the Ottomans, Turks, as your governor? They're not off. So you see how they play this race card. And then the person who wrote this letter to Sharif Hussein, incredibly versed in Islamic fiqh. He wrote, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, Khilafah is only in Quraysh, and these people do not deserve the Khilafah. And then mentions Abu Bakr as the first Khalif, and ends with the last Abbasid Khalif, and says the Ottomans, and he mentions every single one. And you see it in the letter, pages of the names of the Khulafa, and then it ends with, they have, Yawuz Salim has taken the Khilafah by force from you. It is now time for you to re-establish the Khilafah. So they used the Khilafah for their end. And then when Sharif Hussein played their game and went alongside, and then he said, let's re-establish.
I'm ready for it now.
I'm ready. Let's do the Arab Khilafah again. I said, really? And then they really played him. And then they expelled him to an island in the Mediterranean. But you see how if the mind is occupied and you manage to manipulate the mind, everything else fits into place.
Yeah.
And they were very successful in doing this, unfortunately. And that caused the rift. So between 1909 and 1917, so literally how many years?
8 years.
8 years. This changed the whole of the Ummah from being Ummah-centric to race or nation-centric.
Yeah.
And this was the breaking point for the Ummah, internally manipulated by the Western powers from outside.
Okay, I mean that just explains. I mean, obviously, this process. While you said that it started off in Paris, but then finally was imported into these lands. How did they actually deliver that final death blow to the Ottoman state?
Yes.
And what were the circumstances that led to that?
Yeah. So if you read the work of Lawrence of Arabia, you will be shocked how this is really clear in their mind. And he talks about that we need to move the Arabs from making Hajj to Mecca to making pilgrimage to Damascus, the center of Arab nationalism. That's how he talks about it blatantly. And they succeeded in moving people. So the idea is you move people from their deen towards a new ideal. And that's what he talked about in his book, Seven Pillars of Wisdom. So they did this with the Arabs, they did this with the Turks. They didn't succeed with the Kurds. They tried with the Kurds. At that time, it didn't work out too well for them. They were putting Islam first, and you have the example of what was her name, Gertrude Bell, and we talked about her last time, and she is incredible. She met with every sheikh, tribal leader across all of Arabia. So knowledge for them of knowing of how to do things, and you'll see later on how she carved out the region. You had the agreements that they had made. So you had the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which the British and the French were carving out the region between themselves. Let's split the cake between us. Two, you had the McMahon Sharif Hussein correspondence, in which he was promising him, making all these promises. And three, you had the Balfour Declaration. This is all 1915, 16, 17. And then they occupied it in 1970. So they had already secured everyone, put them in their places, and then coming and making the occupation was easy. Even Churchill told Allenby, the general, I want this Christmas the gift for the British people to have Jerusalem. And he actually had it just a few days before Christmas. The worst thing is people celebrating the British occupying their land, and that really shocked me. Seeing the pictures from that time and seeing the accounts that people welcomed the occupier because their mind was occupied. You thought they're your savior, and greeting them and welcoming them and saying poetry about the British, and they are the same happened in the Iraq War. Those who would remember how they were welcomed with roses and so on, and you had exactly the same thing happening in Jerusalem, in Palestine, 1917. And this is the intellectual Nakba is worse than the Nakba of the occupation of the land. The Ummah now was believing in something else. The Ummah is no longer on the equation. And then the British also occupied Istanbul, the center of the Khilafah, for a couple of years. And they would not leave. They didn't leave Istanbul until they had an agreement. And I heard this from a Turkish professor, Yasin Aktay. Normally, this is not talked about in Turkey, but he explained something really amazing. He said, the Turks do not see the British as their enemies within the Turkish psyche. And this is really interesting. They occupied Istanbul, the capital. And how do you not see them as the enemy? And they left with certain conditions. Number one, dismantling of the Khilafah, which happened within a year. 2, changing the alphabet. 3, 4, 5, the British were the most cunning. They'd come in and then they'll play, we're talking about how they occupied India, not even with an army, with a company, and manipulating a large population the way they wanted, by using, and this is what they were really good at, they'll create fiction between people on the ground, and then they'll pretend to be managing it. And that's why they would say, if two fish in the sea are fighting, you'll know that a Brit has passed by. This is how deep it has become, that they'll create fiction between brothers, and these lines never existed before. And they're creating these lines and dividing people across new identities, nation states, nationalism. And last blow to bring all of this together was the dismantling of the Khilafah. No longer is the Khilafah needed. Although it was at that time symbolic, it did not cause a threat. It did not do anything. It was a symbolic, like the Queen in England. She's symbolic in a sense. The Khalifa was, and the last Khalif was with no powers. He had nothing to do. But this is very dangerous. If he stays, then this would be a threat to our future. So get rid of him. And to understand how decapitating the head of the Ummah has an impact on the rest of the Ummah, you just look at the situation of the Muslims today. And to understand how important this is, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam passed away, the Sahaba, before they buried Rasulullah, they had to choose his successor, because a headless ummah cannot move forward. And today, everyone has a different agenda. You just look on Gaza, or look in Sudan, or look in Yemen, or the Uyghurs. No one directs you in a certain direction, and we are falling within the agendas of the others. So on the Uyghur in particular, the British want to use this against the Chinese, so they'll use you for their own end. It's a legitimate case. We need to fight for our brothers, the Uyghur in Eastern Turkestan, but don't be part of someone else's agenda. Do not fit in and play their game. You have to do it on your own. The same in Sudan, the same in Gaza. Today, Gaza has created a shift, and you see people gather around Gaza more than they would gather around Sudan or Eastern Turkestan or any other issue. And the reason is, this is something that Salah ad-Din capitalized on. This has a special place in the heart of every Muslim. Al-Aqsa is not a Palestinian mosque like the Kaaba. And this center will unite the Muslims. We will disagree on everything. We'll disagree in politics, in fiqh, in whatever you want, within even one family. One thing that two believers cannot disagree on is Al-Aqsa. So Salah ad-Din capitalized on this, and this is what is uniting the Ummah today. Uniting humanity, not the Ummah. Sometimes you say non-Muslims are even doing more than Muslims towards Gaza, and it puts the Ummah to shame. They're willing to pay a price for standing for Palestine, and the Muslim is saying to himself,
calculate the risks.
Yeah, let's calculate the risk. I don't want to go to prison. I don't want to lose my job. And the non-Muslim is saying out of his humanity. And this is what Islam teaches you. Your rizq, no one will change it. Your time of death, no one will change it. Why do you fear for dunya? Why do you have wahan? Why do you do this? We cannot break away from this. We have become entrenched in this heart disease that Rasulullah ﷺ describes, and we don't want to break away from it. And looking at this, I think this is the result of a headless ummah. There is no one to send you. You have 56, 57, whatever Muslim states, and each one has these borders, and they say, well, I only work for the benefit of Egypt. I only work for the benefit of Jordan. Lebanon. I was speaking to, just yesterday, we prayed together with some Lebanese brothers, and I said to them, you are from Syria? They said, Lebanon. I said, you're Syrian. I said, I'm from Palestine. But actually, all of us had the same identity as Shami. just a century ago. Now they split us into four. You feel I am Lebanese. What is Lebanese? You feel I am Jordanian. What is Jordanian? But this replaced your identity as a Muslim first. This has overtaken this. And this is uh, really the disaster, the crisis in the Muslim identity. There is a major crisis where you see your nation state as number one. The boundaries of your nation state is holier than the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is holier than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told you, you are one body. You say no. The British told me we are 4, 6. You look at the map in North Africa or across the whole of Africa. You look at it between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the way you see this, it really breaks you down. And we have made these borders our new gods.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I know we've spoken
Yes, on this
point, but this is a really interesting point. Maybe we can end here. But I just wanted you maybe to comment on some recent comments, especially in relation to what you've just said, where the U.S. envoy to the Middle East, Tom Barak, stated just a few days ago that Israel sees these borders as meaningless. He specifically said the Sykes-Picot borders as meaningless. And I saw a discussion on a Jordanian news show where the man said something very, insightful. He said, it seems that even though Sykes-Picot died so many years ago, we're more, committed to ensuring that we protect and honor these borders than them. They're long gone. They're going to face their creator. But yet we're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure we maintain these same borders that they created for us. What would you say about that? Maybe as a final message to us, what can we do going forward?
Yeah.
How do you tackle this as an idea?
Yeah, actually, to add to these two quotes, the head of the Palestine Ulama League said our fiqh is actually based on Sykes-Picot. What he means by that, in Ramadan, in Syria, you're fasting on one day.
Yeah.
In Jordan, another. In Palestine, based on the borders that the British drew and the French, these are your new, and really, someone might say you're exaggerating, but these are idols that we are worshipping beside Allah. This is shirk. And it is a disaster that someone comes and draws a line in the sand that separated families, separated tribes. I lived in the south of Turkey, literally on the border with Syria. And the border literally split the same tribe into two. So you have these have Syrian Arab identity, and these have Turkish identity. And they're neither Arab nor Turks. They are Kurds. Half of them are told you're Arab, the other half are told you're Turks. And this is how, and you see this across we've given the example before of Jordan, how it's drawn with a ruler, but you look across North Africa, you look in the Gulf, you look across the whole of Africa. And what they did was very clever. The colonialists wanted to be the framework in which if there is any differences, you'll come back to me. So what they did was very clever. They'll make sure that in between these borders, there is always a place where the contention will take place. Also discussing this yesterday with the Tunisian brother and talking about how these borders have become a source of enmity between the people.
Yeah.
So the Algerian would hate the Moroccan based on these borders, which never existed. These are divisions that have not just divided us, have moved us away from the sense of the Ummah. And there is no way forward for the Muslims with these borders in place. On the short term, how you can maybe change this, maybe a model like
I was
the,
thinking more, how do you change it in terms of that mindset?
yes.
What would you say to our viewers? What actions should they be
Mm,
taking
yes,
to be part of that
yes,
journey of change? Because at the moment, a lot of us are observing this,
yes,
what you've said, which is, I think your analysis is spot on. We've made these holy, sanctified
yes.
borders. What do we do as a community, as an ummah? How do we actually start that process? Or hopefully we're more than starting, but how do we work to change that?
Get involved in all Muslim matters like it is your own.
Mm.
I think that breaks the. So you'll hear Palestinians in the past say, this is a Palestinian issue, don't get involved.
Mm.
Or you'll hear the Egyptian, this is an Egyptian, and they'll get really heated about it. This is an Egyptian issue, none of your business. And the Syrians are saying this the same today. This is a Syrian matter, none of your business. Really? Exactly, Rasulullah told me exactly the opposite. من لم يهتم بأمر المسلمين فليس منهم. If I do not care about what happens in Syria, in Egypt, in Sudan, I am not a Muslim. This is the words of Rasulullah, not the words of Khalid. You need to break these borders in your mind first and understand what goes on and be part of the solution for these places. You'll find these nationalist ideas, they'll keep pushing. No, this is not a Palestinian issue. And the people of Gaza have shown us. And the Tufan has shown us that this is for Al-Aqsa, for the whole Ummah to wake up and rally around it. And the Ummah is still making calculated risks, whether we get involved or not. There is the flotilla taking place going into Gaza, and you see non-Muslims, Muslims from across the whole of the world, from Malaysia to South Africa, from Turkey. This projects like this, I think, breaks down these barriers. Yeah, you went to Egypt and they stopped you before you got there. We should keep trying. Never give up. This is your issue. We have to build back the body of the Ummah again, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us. You are one body. They want to divide you. This finger is separate from this finger. No, they're actually connected. All the branches of this tree are connected together. They tried to cut the roots. They couldn't. And we need to regrow these veins together, regrow these connections back together, and not recognize these borders. I know today it is a reality on the ground, but we need to be able to break this. Plus, those who have the intellectual mindset to do this is think of the alternative to these states. These states are going to be crumbled by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The day they crumble, what will you have in place? The problem that the Muslim mind also has is we do not have alternatives. So today we see the fallacy of democracy, capitalism, this world order that is crumbling. We need to come up with something alternative to this. In theory, so when it comes, the time comes, it will be implemented. How would you be able to bring the Ummah with from Morocco to Indonesia to the West to wherever? How would you cause this, bring this representation? And I tell this to my students. I have a class on Muslim geographies, modern Muslim geographies, and we talk about this. Today, if the world order fails, what would come out in its place? If you do not have an idea in place, then someone else's idea is going to take over. They fill the gap, and you'll have to live within this their system for another century. You talked about it last time. Just charity, dua, and boycotting is not the way.
It's not the solution to the problem that we're facing now, which is clearly different. I know we need to wrap up, but there was I remember a friend of mine who was reading a book about Britain
Yes.
when the Ottomans were at their peak.
Yes.
And they actually British elites used to dress like the Ottomans.
Yes.
They used to wear turbans.
Yes.
They would want to have the coffee shops like them. So almost exactly, the Ottomans
Yes.
were the trendsetters. They were the leading nation that
Yes.
people looked up to.
Yes. And that's how coffee entered Europe.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
many other things he mentioned, but it was purely because of the Ottoman,
Yes.
the fact that they were such a leading state in the world. People looked up to them.
So let me wrap it up with a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that actually describes this perfectly, what you just said. He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَزَعُ بِالسُّلْطَانِ مَا لَا يَزَعُ بِالْقُرْآنِ. It is power that is needed. So Allah might say this is haram or this is halal. If you don't have the power to implement it, you cannot implement it. And the same applies in the world context, that in reality, without power, even if you have the knowledge, you cannot implement it. And Islam has the perfect solution for the world, but we cannot implement it because we're in this weak state.
Yeah.
And part of the weak state, to wrap the whole discussion, is the division that we have adopted between us, that split us into different identities, and you take pride in that identity and you forget Allah has created you into one ummah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for also making time on your very busy schedule in the UK. And inshallah, hopefully we'll see you again in the near future.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.